So how's it going, everybody? For those of you who don't know me, my name's Thomas Morris. I'm a developer here over at Salsita, and today we're going to be talking about meditation and mindfulness. And there's a lot of stuff been thrown around about this topic lately, and I'm a pretty skeptical person, and so I'm going to share with you my thoughts on it, and we'll go from there. So I wanted to ask you guys, like, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word meditation? If you're anything like me, you probably think of, unwashed hippies playing drum circles and guitars in the forest, or you might think of some kind of like weird new agey, like aligning your chakras and tuning into the higher powers sort of deal, or people who look like this. But honestly, I think that's just kind of a bunch of woo-woo nonsense. There's a lot of stuff out there about meditation, and a lot of it's not very factual. Sorry to say it. I mean, honestly, all this stuff about like crystals, and really, if I hear just even the word energy thrown around, like I immediately have a bodily reaction, like I'm going to throw up. So that kind of stuff's not for me, not for me. But even though there are a lot of different types of meditation out there, there is one that I've actually found to be kind of useful, and it's called mindfulness. There are several different types, but yeah, there's this one here, and this one in particular has been getting a lot of attention lately. Sure, not all of it should be trusted, but from my own personal experience, I've noticed some benefits from doing some of it. So it's along that line that we're going to talk about this, while still trying to keep a skeptical eye and not be too believing of any, potential claims here. So where did this whole concept of mindfulness first come from, right? Well, actually, it was a Buddhist practice. Started a long time ago by this guy, and it's called Vipassana, which is just like the original word, which kind of translates to mindfulness. There you go, you get it. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, wait a minute, Thomas, I thought you say you don't believe in all this woo-woo stuff. What's this? And yep, totally fair point. I mean, yes, mindfulness did originally come from Buddhism, but just because the Buddhists made it doesn't necessarily mean that it's, just ridiculous, right? I mean, Buddhists also write books and read books. So if I read a book and or write a book, does that make me a Buddhist? Nah. And I mean, there's all kinds of really useful practices that have come from all different types of religions. I mean, a lot of religions teach to be generous, or to be kind, or to foster feelings of brotherhood, right? And I think these perspectives are really great. I mean, generosity, yeah, that's cool. I like that idea. Does that mean that I belong to that religion because of that? No. So do I believe in reincarnation? No. Do I believe in karma? No. Do I believe in Nirvana? Well, I mean, I guess kinda, but no, not really, no. So can meditation still be useful? Yeah, definitely. I don't know what we're yelling about. Why are we shouting? So one of the main ideas behind meditation here is that we spend a lot of our time just worrying about things and thinking about stuff and wanting them to be different in a way. So like when things are bad, obviously it's easy to go to a place of, man, this sucks. I really want this to get better. I want this to end. And even when things get good though, it's easy to be like, oh, wouldn't it be so much better if this, or being afraid that, this nice thing, oh man, it's going to come to an end soon or whatever. And so like we're constantly just thinking about how we want things to be different rather than just being here right now and enjoying it for what it is. And it's kind of funny, right? Because both rich and poor people like kind of seem to have this struggle in a sense. I mean, of course you can think of like the miserable person in squalor who's like, oh man, I wish I had enough to eat today. Of course that sucks. But also you think of, the rich millionaire out there who has it all and is miserable. And, nobody of course wants to listen to their problems because they're like, shut up, you have it way better. But still, I mean, this person here probably is also feeling awful because they're also still thinking about what they want or worrying that they're going to lose it or whatever. And so the main undergirding thought here is that we miss out a lot by just not paying attention to what's happening right now. Like, we spend too much time just thinking about stuff instead of just letting stuff be as it is. And so, yeah, what exactly is mindfulness overall then? Well, I guess like the easiest definition is paying attention to what's going on without interpreting it or judging it. You know, when you do this kind of like meditation practice, you just sit quietly in a place for a while. You see what you notice. And the most important part is, like, when you notice stuff, you don't think about it. Just notice it and be like, huh, and just keep noticing stuff. And that's about it. I mean, it sounds pretty simple and really different from this whole, you know, crystal alignment, whatever, you know, tapping into the energy of the universe thing, you know. It's just that. Just sit and see what you notice. And so, even though this sounds really simple, for one, in my own life, I've noticed that there have been a lot of benefits that come from it. Of course, I'm not perfect, and I'll explain that later. You can pick apart all my faults later on towards the end of this thing. But yeah, I mean, some of the benefits that I've noticed and have read about as well is that, well, for one, sitting and just like quietly paying attention to what's happening for some reason helps you focus better. Weird, right? And it's also easy too to like notice when you start to get distracted and to be like, oh, wait, I'm distracted. And then going back to what you're doing normally. Also, which we'll talk about, it helps you kind of manage your emotions better. And also too, it helps you kind of like notice what bad habits you have, and it kind of gives you a choice. You can choose whether or not you want to keep doing them or not, which is nice. Also helps you remember stuff because, you know, if you're there just paying attention to what's happening, it kind of tends to filter down into your long-term memory more, which is nice. Also, one of the things I've really felt is that there's kind of a feeling of more appreciation for stuff because you just kind of pay attention to it and you see things for like the beauty that they inherently have rather than what you want them to be or whatever. And also communicating better is one of the really big things that I've noticed, because it helps you become more aware of what you're thinking and feeling and like what, you know, you might think the other person is saying, and also helps you focus on what they're saying better. Anyway, this is a lot of stuff, but we'll break it down piece by piece. So yeah, this is a quick breakdown of what we're going to talk about. We already talked about hippies. We talked about some of the benefits and how more or less it works. And now we're doing this thing right now where I tell you what we're going to talk about. And then we're actually going to really try it a bit right here. So get ready for that. And after that, we're going to talk about how thinking about stuff is really closely tied to like judging stuff. And I'll get to that in a bit. And we'll get a little bit more into the benefits that you can get from, you know, practicing this and doing it kind of more in everyday life. And if you are interested from there, I'll give some tips as to how to start regularly meditating and some potentially helpful apps, ones that I've used that I think are pretty good and can help you out if you're interested. So, all right, you guys ready? Do this with me here. I can't see your faces, so I'll just have to assume that you're playing along here at home. But do me a favor and just sit for a second. You can close your eyes if you want to. You can keep them open. And just take a couple of deep breaths. And while you're taking those breaths, you might notice some different feelings. You might notice the feeling of the rise and fall of your chest. You might notice coldness at the tip of your nose as air goes in and out. Notice what it feels like to be sitting down in a chair right now. Notice the weight of gravity pulling you down. Maybe the feel of your arms hanging beside you and your hands on your lap. And just notice those. Okay, cool. Thanks for doing that with me. That's it. congratulations. You've just maybe had your first foray into dipping your toes in the proverbial waters of mindfulness meditation. And that's pretty much it, right? You just sit there and you just pay attention to what's going on. Don't think about it or any of that. And there's a lot of different things that you can pay attention to. You can pay attention to the feelings in your body like we did. What does it feel like to have gravity pulling you down into your chair? You can notice what feels comfortable. You can notice what feels uncomfortable. You can notice, and this is actually one of my favorites, is noticing just the sounds that you hear nearby and kind of like how they come and go. And when you really start to listen, it's kind of interesting. You can notice the different thoughts that come up in your head as they appear. And this one's a little bit more difficult because it's really easy to, you notice the thoughts coming up and it's really easy to start like thinking about them. And then it kind of defeats that purpose I originally said, right? Where you get lost in thought and whatever. There's a helpful analogy that I heard on the Headspace app, actually, that I'll talk about later. They kind of talked about how if you're sitting and you're paying attention to your thoughts, imagine it like you're kind of sitting on the side of a road watching cars go by. And, those cars are your thoughts. You just see them come and you see them go, and that's it. But it's really easy, oftentimes, if you see something or, maybe your friend's driving by in that car, it's really easy to want to get up and chase after them or, to interact. But, and that's, of course, it's normal. But you can always then just say, all right, and then go back to sitting on the side of the road and watching the cars go by. And so that's, it's interesting, but it's a bit more difficult to do. You can pay attention to your mood, for instance. Like, do you feel sad right now? Do you feel tired? Do you feel excited about something? And one of the ones you often hear people talk about is paying attention to the breath. And I also mentioned that a little bit too, right? Like, what does it feel like to have your chest rise and fall? Or what does the air actually just feel like going in and out of your nose? And you hear a lot of people talk about this. And no, it's not because there's anything mystical or magical about the breath. It's really just that it's convenient because you're always breathing. And it's just really easy to pay attention to that. And the funny thing is too, is if you really pay attention, you'll kind of notice that every breath is a bit different. I mean, unless you like maybe do meditation normally, you might be like, that's stupid, but just take my word for it. Or you can start meditating and see what you think. But so really, once again, the most important, like the keystone issue on this is just not to think about it. And that's weird. And it's kind of counterintuitive, right? Because we always want to think about stuff. Thinking overall is a good thing. But the trick is like not to get lost in thought and carried away somehow. Is to always somehow like remain here and being aware of what's going on. It's easy to, think about all the plans that you have going on, or, oh my God, I have so much I need to do, or, oh, what would happen if, such and such. Or, thinking about some jerk who, was rude to you in Bila the other day or something. There's always this stuff going on, but it's really easy, when you're just so tied up in the constant thinking to miss what's going on. Like maybe a good analogy would be, have you ever been kind of talking with somebody and then like while you're talking to them, you realize that you're thinking about stuff and then they've maybe said like 2 sentences and you're just there like, oh man, they're still talking. And you come back. It's kind of that same thing, right? Like if you're always thinking, like it's really easy to get distracted and miss what's happening right now. And that's kind of the big story here. And it's kind of funny, you do start to realize how much of your day you start just, you just start worrying about stuff just based off of like random thoughts. It's weird. But so, yeah, when it comes to, at least while sitting there in your chair, meditating, it's really easy to get distracted and start thinking about stuff. That's really normal. I mean, I've been doing this for about maybe 2 years or so, casually, maybe like 5-10 minutes a day. I'm not an expert. And, even though I've been doing it for that long, I still get distracted about every 6 or 7 seconds. It happens a lot, and that's normal. That's fine. The main, actually, I think the main part is just realizing that you're distracted and just saying, oh, I'm distracted. Okay. And then just coming back to focusing, say, on the breath or something like that. And the main key is that it's really easy to get frustrated while you're doing this. It'd be like, oh, I'm supposed to be meditating, but here I am just thinking about stuff. But it's funny, getting frustrated and, like mad at it, when you pick it apart, that's really just another thought, right? And that's actually, I'll talk more about this in a second, but it's actually kind of a profound insight that like getting frustrated is actually just another thought, and you don't need to do that. You can just notice that you're distracted and say, oh, okay, cool, let's go back to meditating now. And so this is, I'll also get to this a little bit more, but things really start to take off when you realize that meditating isn't just about like sitting in your chair every now and again, trying to clear your thoughts and just focus on what's happening. It really matters. Like it's kind of just like you're practicing for real life. And real life, as you start to do this more often, it starts to kind of show itself that whenever you think about stuff, it's really easy to judge it as whether being something that you like or you don't like or something like that. It's really normal. We're always getting inputs from our senses. Like you see stuff, you smell, hear, touch, and when you're not paying attention, it's super easy to just go to this place of I like it, I don't like it, whatever. I hear my neighbors talking through the walls or something. It's easy to just be like, oh God, why are they always talking? I can always hear them. Or if you're sitting, you feel feeling in your chair and it's uncomfortable. Like, I don't like that, or I'm stressed out about whatever, but what if instead of going to this place of you have an input and then you immediately assign thoughts to it, what if you were just say, okay, this thing is happening. Huh. All right. Well, what does that feel like? What do I feel like this reaction is that's coming up in me to it? And just notice that. And so let's just try that really quick, if you're willing to take this journey with me. So we're going to do another like little exercise here. So if you don't mind, just kind of sit for a second and just get a little bit quiet and just notice something that feels uncomfortable, like in your body. It could be your back, it could be your right foot. And just feel that and just sit with it for a bit. Like don't try to change to make it go away. Just sit with that feeling for a couple of seconds. And if it's possible, try not to go to thinking about it. Just really feel it. Does it feel like pressure in that area? Does it feel like tingling or heat? For me, for instance, I feel a little bit of soreness in the back of my neck right now. And it's really easy to think, oh, I want to undo that. Oh, I need to, stretch that out. It probably means that, I have bad posture or whatever. But if you just cut that off, you just sit with it for a bit. You can kind of feel sort of another texture of it in a way. Okay, so you can stop doing the exercise now. But so if you noticed while you were sitting here, assuming you were actually doing the exercise, you can kind of notice that if you stop thinking about the stimulus so much, it kind of starts to feel different. It kind of takes on a different, like I said, texture or like a different tone in a way. And if that's the case, you can kind of start to see that oftentimes we're just kind of going in this circle of like something comes in, you think about it, and it just like causes this spiral of thinking and thinking and thinking. And sometimes you don't have to do that. You can just sit and observe what it is you're feeling at the moment. And so this brings me back to the thing that I said before. Meditation is all well and good. You can sit there and you can do it, a couple of minutes a day if you feel like it, whatever. But I think really, like for me at least, the real benefits have started to come in when I realized that meditating itself, sitting there in the chair quietly, is actually just dress rehearsal for the real thing. And, and these same concepts that go on, like while you're meditating, you just notice stuff. Okay, some thoughts are coming up about it, but I don't have to deal with that. I'll just feel this for a bit. That thing, like using that in everyday life, can actually change a lot of stuff in a lot of, well, I dare say, impactful ways, really. And one way that you can kind of start applying this towards real life, there's this concept of, say, walking meditation. And you can try this if you'd like to. It's pretty easy. Just next time you go for a walk, just especially if you go for a walk by yourself, just notice what's around you. Notice what you see while you do it. You can notice the feelings that are in your body. What do your feet feel like inside your shoes? What does the terrain feel like that you're walking on? You can notice the sounds, whether you hear birds or cars going by or something. And if you feel distracted, you start thinking about the thing you saw, whatever, that's okay. You can just notice, okay, I got distracted, and come back to what's happening right now without always, going to thought. And so that's kind of like an easier way to bridge over towards real life. It's sort of this, bridge between like sitting down, meditating, and, well, every, more or less, well, more often, I guess, during your day, if you can start applying these ideas, you notice that things happen and you have a reaction to them, but you don't necessarily have to like judge it in that way or like go into this overthinking way. Just let it be what it is, and all right, fine. And kind of like in the same way, if you're out in everyday life, you get distracted while you're, doing something, or you start to think about it, you can realize, you just take a breath and focus on the actual physical feeling that's going on. That's it. I mean, you can see this isn't very mystical, right? I mean, it's just, you're just sitting there paying attention. That's about it. And so this kind of bleeds into another part, which deals with emotions. We talked about how we can manage, how it helps manage emotions a bit better and whatnot. So let's talk about that for a bit. All right. So once again, if you practice something with me, take a moment and think about something that just really makes you mad, like something that just pisses you off. Just think about it for a bit. And when you think about it, notice what that does to you. Like, notice how it feels physically. Like for me, I remember when I was getting on the tram this morning, somebody cut me off while I was trying to like get in line. And I remember feeling like just how rude it was. And even just thinking about that right now, I feel this sort of like constricting feeling in the back of my neck, thinking about it. Maybe for you, if you're doing this right now, you'll notice that there's kind of a physical feeling that often comes with this. And that's normal. Okay. If you were doing that exercise, it's cool. You can stop. So I think that's also something that happens here. Oftentimes there's an external stimulus and you have some kind of response to it, physically. And, like for instance, you feel, anger or whatever, and it makes you feel like hot around your neck or, something like that, or tight in your jaws. And, because that happens, like, something happens that makes you angry, you feel tight in your jaws. Something that happens that makes you feel tight in the jaws. Because we're good pattern recognition machines, it's really easy to start to correlate these feelings. And like when you feel tightness in your jaws, you're like, oh, I'm angry. I'm not saying this is a conscious thought, a conscious process. I think it kind of happens under the hood, without us really realizing. And so, I've kind of noticed with myself, and you can test this and see for your own self if this is true, that, when something happens, my thought process kind of goes something like this. Usually a thought occurs, or something happens. For instance, you think about, Yana, your friend yelling at you earlier today. And, when she yells at you, it pisses you off, you start to feel mad, and so as a result, this unconscious process of this person talking to you, possibly even before you think about it, you start to get this physical thing, like, you start to feel hot in your face, for instance. And then of course, you recognize that as a certain emotion. Yana yelled at you, you're mad, right? Yeah, obviously. And then because you're feeling mad, it's really easy to go to this next place where you think another thought. You think like, oh my God, she's always complaining. She sucks, man. I hate Yana. Oh. And there you go. You're off on it, right? And like, she's always complaining about stuff. And this next thought then goes and feeds into this feedback loop. And you feel more hot in your face, and it causes you to feel more angry. And then like, she's always complaining. Why can't she just be a more reasonable person? And on and on and on. And the race is started. But remember though, that anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. But okay, so what if we do apply this kind of same meditation principle in this kind of situation though? Once again, that whole principle is like, you just notice what's happening and you just let that be. You don't have to think about it. The stimulus comes in, you notice it. Oh, what does that feel like? And just sit with that feeling, whatever it happens to be. And okay, when that happens, especially like when the heat of the moment you're feeling like emotional, it's easy to start going into this place of, thinking about the reasons why and, why they're wrong, you're right. And that's okay. That's totally okay. But just kind of like also that meditation practice, you can realize, oh, I'm starting to think about it now. Okay. Like take a breath and come back to what is it that you're actually just feeling physically in your body. And so in a situation like this, applying this sort of, let's say, meditation outlook to this this sort of practical situation, you can kind of snip off a portion of that feedback loop. So, all right, this comes up, Yana yells at you, you start to feel hot in your face, you realize, oh, I'm angry right now. And instead of going to another thought and whatever, like, what if you just let it be that? Like, you feel the heat that's in your face, you feel the response, and you just sit with that, and you explore, okay, what does that feeling just feel like? And so, because I would make the claim that a lot of emotion gets its fuel from just this feedback loop, you think about stuff and you get pissed, and then you keep mulling on it and whatever. If you cut off that feedback loop, it runs out of fuel faster. It's easier to not stay mad so long. Sure, things happen, you still get pissed, that's fine. But you don't have to just stay and get carried away with it as much. And so without this thing happening here, it's easier to just sort of move on without getting wrapped up in it. And also, if you're not just constantly building up and spiraling and thinking, it's a lot easier to take a step back during that moment and to deal with the situation in a skillful manner. Instead of this autopilot response of, oh my God, how could they say this? Like, they definitely are way out of line. Blah. It's easier to just, once you're kind of there in that place, if you notice, oh, I'm getting emotional now, it's easier to kind of ask that question, well, how would I like to react here? Or I noticed that, okay, I've tended to get more angry when this kind of thing happens. What can I say or do right now to like solve the situation before I get to that place? And yeah, so it kind of builds off of this idea, right? Like not getting so carried away, not feeling so just identified with the thoughts that are constantly spinning in your head. And so I think that this can actually be applied to a lot of other ways in life as well. And this is kind of maybe getting to like a broader, let's say, philosophical view on how this works. But I would make the claim that I think, yeah, negative things happen, that sucks. But really, we make it way worse by just thinking about them. You scrape your knee, that hurts. You burn your hand, fire still burns. But usually whenever something happens, we spend a lot of time just like thinking about this negative thing that's going to happen and anticipating it and stressing out. And then it finally happens and, oh, it's terrible. And then after it's done, you think about, oh God, like how could this happen? Or, what could I have done to prevent this? Or, all the possible things that are going to be as a result of this now. And how do I, and there's all this stress associated with it. But what if instead it's just the thing happens and you realize, yeah, that thing happens and this hurts. What does that feel like? shit, and then let it be at that, instead of all of the extra stress associated with it. There's this quote by, well, it was Shakespeare, but it was in his play Julius Caesar. So Julius Caesar says this in the play. He says, "Cowards die many times before their deaths, but the valiant never taste of death but once." And I think it's kind of a similar situation here, right? It's like you can sit and think about all the ways that you're dreading this thing, and how can you prevent it from happening again, or you could just experience it once and that's it. Do you want to keep experiencing it a lot or just once? At least for me, if I'm able to choose, I would choose this one. Not saying it's always easy, because I'm human, I'm imperfect, right? So I've also noticed this kind of thing happens to me a lot. And if you're anything like me, maybe it happens to you. So I'll just be sitting there doing whatever, and then just some random worrisome thought will just appear out of nowhere. Like I'll think about the way that somebody said something the other day or something, and I start to wonder about that. Like, well, did they actually say that, or did they not? Like, what do they mean by that? Or, and then you start to think about did they say that because they've actually been pissing me for a while? Oh God, was it because of this other thing that maybe I did? Or, well, maybe I should talk with them about it. Maybe I should try to, and well, if they're mad at me because of this, and then, oh my God, it's just so much. And you realize this whole thing was because I was just sitting there on my computer randomly, and this thought came up. And what's the deal, really? And it kind of makes you think, these things cause us a lot of pain and a lot of stress sometimes, right? I mean, at the end of the day, what is really a thought? It's maybe some firings of electrical signals in the organ that's inside your skull, right? I mean, can you see a thought? Can you hold it in your hand? How much does it weigh? It's funny how these are such small things that they kind of tend to just flit in and out of our minds, and they can give us so much pain. I mean, I'm not saying that thoughts are bad. I mean, thoughts have put people on the moon. They have come up with cures for amazing diseases. They have, done incredible, wonderful things. Of course, thinking is good. But sometimes I think we need to know when it's useful to take a step back and just let a thought be a little thought and just let it go. You can kind of similar in just during that sort of meditation practice, you notice this thought comes up and you notice, oh, okay. And you come back to what it feels like in your breath or in your body. And that's it. Instead of launching off on this, carnival of terror and thinking about it. And in a way, I think it really opens up a lot for you. You don't have to, you don't have to take yourself so seriously. Like I found that I don't have to really deal with every single spinning random thought that shows up in my head. For instance, you can realize okay, yeah, there's just chatter occasionally, and that's not a big deal, or that I'm not subject to the emotions that come up, and you just, in a sense, it kind of allows you more space to choose. Instead of getting carried away and whatever, it's easier to just take a step back and ask yourself, what do I want to do here? And it's kind of funny though, we often think that the thoughts that we have are this, that's reality because we've thought about it, but oftentimes not, right? Like with the example of, that person, oh my God, they said that thing that one way, what does this mean? The funny thing is that actually we have an accurate representation of reality right here all the time, in the present. And you can always just go to that instead of constantly trying to calculate and formulate, And so it's kind of funny, but the only real thing that's happening is what's happening right now. If you think about it in this sense, there's this guy, Robert Pirsig, and he said, the past only exists in our memories, and the future is only in our plans, really. And the present is really is our only reality. It's the only thing that's happening right now, right? I mean, all the rest is really just thoughts. This is maybe a bit of a more personal story, but for me, like when I first moved to Prague, I was really struggling with a lot of feelings of loneliness. I mean, you're a foreigner, you're living in a new place, don't know very many people yet, don't have very many friends, not in college anymore, so it's harder to meet people. People are more focused on their careers, their partners, maybe having kids, and it's just harder to meet people, right? And I started meditating maybe a bit later, but afterwards it allowed me to look back in retrospect and realize that, I was feeling pretty bad, pretty awful, honestly. But looking back, I think the real reason I felt so bad was because I kept telling myself that I was lonely and I didn't really have very many people to go to or any of that kind of stuff. And, if I try to recreate that feeling now, because, I can't go back in time, right? But if I think about, well, what did it actually just feel like to be lonely? If I were just shut up in my mind and stop talking and just feel it for a bit, what does that feel like? Well, I mean, I think it felt like a heaviness in my shoulders a little bit. I felt like there was a little bit of heaviness in breathing. And at least in terms of the physical qualities of what I could measure, that was about it. And the feeling was, well, can I live with the feeling of having some heaviness in my shoulders, or it's a little bit heavier to breathe? Sure, maybe it's not comfortable, but it's really not that bad. I think it was really like the feeling that I had that was so awful really was all of the other questions, the what ifs that, there was this constant spinning of, well, what if this is just a new chapter of my life where what if it's different this time? It's going to be so much harder to meet people. Everyone's busy, and if I can't meet very many people, am I going to have to deal with this forever? And what if I can't really make very many friends? And, and there was just kind of this piling on of all of this other stuff instead of maybe in a sense, just putting that aside for a bit and just thinking, okay, how does this feel right now? And I'm not saying that loneliness doesn't hurt. It doesn't suck. Sure, of course. But I'm saying that I wish that I had realized that at the time, that I could have just kind of put all that spiraling, whatever, thinking aside and just let it be what it was at the time. So we talked a bit about as well with how meditation can help with focus and things like that. Who knew? Sitting and just thinking or sitting and just feeling something as boring as your breath going, something as boring as that and doing it over and over again, somehow or another, it helps you focus more, because if you can focus on something that boring, you can focus on things that are probably slightly less boring than that. And there's a lot of things that are less boring than that. It's also, I've kind of felt that whenever I do meditation afterwards, after the actual sitting down and doing it, I usually just feel a lot more clear in my head. It's easier to think in general, and this clearness of head and this kind of lack of stress, it helps me be more productive. This is probably a truism at this point because, when you're not stressed, you work better. Oh, weird. But it really has helped, And the thing that I noticed, or the thing that I mentioned before as well is, when you're not, well, it becomes easier to notice what's happening, right? Kind of earlier how it's I'm emotional right now, or I'm feeling emotional. Or, it's easier to be like, oh, I'm distracted. And that happens a lot faster somehow. And it's like, oh, I'm distracted. Okay. And then you just come back to what you're doing. And also, like I said, it's easier to focus on conversations with people too, in a sense, because instead of having the fucking ticker tape circus running in your head, it's easier to just shut all that off and just listen to what the person's actually saying. And instead of guessing, what should I say in response or how should I frame it? It's just easier to just shut up, just let it just be here. Just have a talk. And so I noticed before that, or I mentioned as well that this kind of does help with feelings of appreciation too. It's, sitting and just sort of noticing, while you're, I guess there's kind of this dichotomy, right? You sit and you meditate, and there's also what you do in real life that's kind of similar to it. Sitting and just kind of feeling what it feels like to be here you start to notice more details of things. And in a sense, as you start to do that more regularly doing meditation, it kind of just becomes normal to do that in everyday life. One of the things I've really noticed is that since starting to do this, I just notice a lot more of like the beautiful tiny details in things that I wouldn't normally do. Usually, I guess before it'd be a lot easier to just like walk by a tree and just be like, it's a tree, but I don't know, now it's somehow more natural just to look at it and to notice like the intricacies of the bark on there, or the way that, the leaves fall. It's funny, it's interesting. And well, sorry guys, I have a confession to make. I said this wasn't going to be some hippy dippy thing, and here we are, we're getting all tree hugger and just, sorry. But yeah, so really, okay, getting back to what I really actually meant though, is that, in a sense, it's noticing the details of things it really does just help you see a lot more aesthetic beauty in places, like noticing the way the light falls through your window onto your table, or, the way that the water on, I don't know, the leaves outside slowly drips off during the rain. It sounds trite maybe, but it really is funny how you see just these simple, quiet qualia of life, and how they're just so much more, you can really see just how intricate they really are. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful in a way, I'll say it. So now we'll talk a bit about how some people have gotten pretty metaphysical on this, talking about some deeper ideas about what this means to be alive and whatnot. But I promise I'll try to keep it as fact-based as I can, and not to go too off the deep end here. But there've been quite a few people that have come to some sort of, let's say, philosophical conclusions by doing some meditation, paying close attention to like what actually happens internally when a thought comes up and things like that. And there've been some people that have, come up with ideas that say that, for instance, even this concept of the self, this feeling of I that you carry around in your head, and, like I have emotions, I have whatever, that is actually just an illusion. It's just, actually, at the end of the day, if you really boil it down, if you sit and you get really quiet, you'll notice that even this feeling of yourself that you carry, that's actually just another thought. And I mean, okay, cool, take it or leave it, whatever, that's fine. There's been another one that's also been kind of interesting that, some people have said that, if you notice what happens whenever you decide to make a decision, when you make a choice, or, you have some want that comes up, it just kind of actually just spontaneously appears. Just kind of the way that actual thoughts do. And if that's the case, maybe there's no such thing as free will. And, so people have taken this tool and have taken some other, offshoot ideas from it. Look, I'm not here to try to convince you of any of that, but I'm just saying it's kind of interesting in a way that this, let's say this act can provide you a way to look into it. And that's actually the thing that is really good about meditation, I would say, is that you don't have to take any of these statements on faith at all. Meditation in a sense is actually just kind of a tool, or like a laboratory in a sense, for just finding out stuff about yourself. It provides you a way of doing these experiments yourself and seeing if they're true or not. And so all this stuff like, oh, there's no free will or whatever, like, oh, there's no such thing. So, whatever, you don't have to take any of that on faith. You can actually just try it out yourself and see if you find that to be true or not. You don't have to listen to some like enlightened whatever and take what they say without testing it. No, like there's no magic involved here, as you've seen. Like all it is just, you just sit quietly for a bit and see what's up. From there, you can figure it out. And so with all this, as we're getting close to wrapping up, if you are interested in doing meditation regularly, that's great, cool, good for you. I like it. I would recommend starting small. It's really easy to just, you kind of get excited like, oh man, that sounds really great. I want to go and meditate for an hour a day. Don't meditate for an hour a day, especially at the start, because it's it's really easy to get excited and do something full force, and then you just realize, oh man, this is way too much. This sucks, and you never want to do it again. And so I would say it's a lot better just to like do something small, just make it easy. Just do it for 5 minutes a day. That's what I did for the first like year of meditating, because it's just so much, like 5 minutes a day, it's easy to find the time to do that. Like even when I was running late to a place, I'd be like, you know what, I can be 5 minutes later even. And also I would probably recommend to do it at the same time every day. If you do, it kind of makes it easier to just kind of work it into your routine. Like for instance, you wake up, after you brush your teeth, you just go and you sit for a bit quietly for 5 minutes. And somehow or another, just doing it like this, you have this cue, okay, teeth are brushed, time to do this thing now. Burp, 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 burp. It just becomes a part of your morning routine or whatever. Actually for mine, I get to work, I make a cup of coffee, I take 3 sips, and that 3 sips is enough to make me start to feel woken up enough. And then I go and I sit for a bit and I meditate for 10 minutes. And then I come back, and when I'm done, it's nice because I have a cup of coffee still waiting there for me, and that works for me. And so if you're doing it, you can sit on a chair or a pillow on the floor, perhaps. For me, it's really easy for me to fall asleep while I meditate. So I usually like to be a bit uncomfortable personally. So I'll usually sit on the floor, but other people sit on the chair, no problem. I'd also recommend doing a guided meditation, probably with an app, because sitting silently, it's just kind of hard to have any direction of where to go and that kind of stuff. So there've been a few apps, we're not at that slide yet. There've been a few apps that I'll talk about in a second. But so remember, if you are doing this, you are going to get distracted. That's normal. That's how brains work. And that's totally cool. You don't have to feel frustrated. You don't have to feel bad or mad at yourself. Just realize that like feeling frustrated and like getting mad, that's just another thought. And you don't have to do that. You can just let that go, come back and focus on your breath or whatever it is that you're focusing on. And so, yeah, I talked about these apps that I've used. For instance, I first started using Headspace, and no, they did not give me any money to advertise for them. I mean, that'd be great. I wouldn't mind, but they did not. I used Headspace starting out, and it's pretty good. Like, it's nice and approachable. The guy has a really easy way of just kind of explaining stuff. Every couple of videos in the series every couple of sessions in the series, they'll have these videos that kind of explain things really well. That one about the cars, sitting and watching the cars go by, that was originally from Headspace that I saw. And so it's good. It's a nice, easy way to just start out. There's another one called Waking Up by Sam Harris, which is also really, really great. But I would recommend to maybe go into that after you've tried doing meditating a little bit more. Because like this one, it's still approachable. He does break it down, but like it's pretty heavy. Like he deals with like a lot more of these sort of ideas of like these profound, deep ideas. And it's good. It also, he doesn't get into like some kind of pseudoscience, whatever. Like actually this guy's a neuroscientist himself, and he keeps it like really factual and it's good. It's good. But it is deeper and it is more like profound, and he does focus on some of this metaphysical stuff while still maintaining this atmosphere of don't believe it just because I said it, try it out, see if you see it or not. Yeah. There's also this one called the Calm app. I've heard good things, but actually I've not really used it very much, but you can try it and tell me how you like it. So yeah. All right. So this has been, as we're wrapping up here, this has been kind of just like mostly the theory of it. Don't think that just because I'm over here just talking, pontificating here, that I'm some expert and I'm awesome and I think I'm not. I suck, man. Like, I don't know everything. I still get mad at stupid shit. Like, I'm really self-conscious a lot, and I probably spin myself out worrying a lot more than I probably should. So like, don't think that I'm just some expert and I'm over here like, look, meditation is the best and you will have, no. Look, I have to admit though that I have felt some benefits since starting to do it. Particularly, I feel like it's easier to focus, and also like my memory is really bad in general. Those of you who know me well will know this is true. I've noticed that my memory feels a bit better since trying to do this, so that's great. Also, I just feel a lot more content about life and not so worried about stuff since starting to do this, so that's nice. But also keep in mind that if you do start this, it is a bit of a slow process. I think I felt this, and also another person I talked to. you know who you are, who did it. They said it took them maybe about a month or so to start to really feel some effects. And that's like doing it regularly. And I agree with that. Yeah, it does take some time. It's not like you meditate once and then suddenly your eyes are opened and you see the universe or any of that crap. So yeah, it takes some time. It's a slow burn, but it's nice. That's it. Thanks for listening to me jabber on for a bit.